My name is Craig Nash. I'd like to welcome you to another It's a Grand Life. And I want to just thank you all for all of the downloads that are happening across the country of our podcast, It's a Grand Life. It's really starting to take off. You know, we're on 29 platforms. So wherever you get your podcast, you should be able to find It's a Grand Life. But it's really, really starting to take off. And you are just going to be so blessed today with our guests from Fort Myers, Florida, Ron and Cyndi Myers. And they have just got, Lord willing, we're going to have them on for 2 segments. They are leading a grand family, and I know you'll want to hear how are they doing that. And then they've got a lot of insight as to how you, as a grand family, could still relocate to Florida if that's what you want to do. But we're just so delighted that they're here. And Cyndi and Ron, why don't you introduce yourselves to our audience and give them a little idea of how you ended up in South Florida and how your grand family came together and how you got involved in real estate. So thanks so much for being our guest today.
You're welcome. You're welcome. You said we only had 15 minutes. That's a lot of stuff. But anyways, well, we came to Fort Myers, Florida. So I was married before, and my ex-husband went back to school to become a PA, wanted to, for fun, apply to jobs in Florida. And his father lived in Fort Myers. So that's how I got to Fort Myers, Florida. Then in 2011, I got divorced, moved back to Michigan, got my own place, got settled, and then met Mr. Ron Myers. And then Craig Nash actually was our officiant. So he actually was our guy. He married us that day.
That's right.
And after we got married, Ron said, I am sick of this cold weather. So he said, I want to move somewhere warm. And because I had already been here before, kept my real estate license here, I suggested that we move here and he get his license. So that's how we ended here in Fort Myers, Florida. So we're both we're a domestic team with eXp Realty here in Fort Myers, Florida. But when I was in Michigan, my daughter lived in Florida, and then she came to move to Michigan also, and ended up living with me with her boyfriend at the time.
Okay.
Came to me pregnant. Yeah, that was it. And so, yeah, so while she was pregnant, she lived with me. And then the boyfriend moved in too. And he didn't have a job. She had a job. He didn't have a high school diploma. I didn't know that. And so, you know, and before I had moved, I guess I'll go back because I also had a son that had a addiction problem, ended up going to Teen Challenge for the year,
Okay.
exceedingly graduated from that, which thank God for that. But during that time, my ex-husband, Tim, told me I was an enabler and that I needed to go to codependency meetings.
Okay.
So I did, right? And so that really helped me also with my daughter who got pregnant at her and Lexi were actually pregnant at the same time.
Right.
Yeah.
That's my daughter, Lexi, you're exactly right.
Yeah.
Only, about 1,200 miles apart or something like that. But yeah.
Yeah. So, and yeah, it's funny how that worked out, huh, Craig? So anyways,
But that was not something either of us planned on. We,
No.
In fact, for our listeners' benefit or audience benefit, that you and I met a long time ago when we went to the same church it was in Livonia, Michigan at the time, and then it moved to Northville, Michigan. And our kids were friends, and then you moved around, went to Florida for a while, came back up and went back to Florida. And if you were to ask us 30 years ago, Cyndi or Craig, do you anticipate that your church-going daughters were going to be pregnant outside of marriage? We would have said, no, that was never our idea or our goal. But things happen sometimes, and and the good Lord challenges us with, well, now how are you going to handle this? And then you met this wonderful gentleman to your left there, Ron Myers, who God in his sovereign purpose found someone who could really manage the beans and the potatoes and the side of the business. And with your director of joy background, being the most positive person on the planet, it's just really worked for you guys from a business standpoint in Florida, unbelievably. And your marketing is just second to none. You're always having little caricatures of yourself in your latest house, which is just terrific. But on this first segment of our podcast, because we're going to talk a lot about real estate and relocation in our next segment, but how have you guys, in addition to getting married and relocating, how have you integrated this, your grandson into your family unit and all of the kids that you bring to this collective marriage and make it work? How has that worked out?
Well, with Preston, Megan and her husband struggled a lot, right? There's a lot of struggles there. And so I would help as much as I could, like they were living with me. And then I gave them a timeline of how long they could live with me before they had to find their own place. Her husband did get his diploma and he did get a job. Megan always had a job. And then So I gave them a timeline. They did get their own apartment and move out of the house. But, that was hard too, because you had to give up some control of this baby.
Right.
So to watch them and their stuff, their messy stuff, I won't go into the stuff, with a baby is hard, right? Is hard. So how much do you step in? How much do you let go? And then I met Ron and that family came with me pretty much. I mean, that was not only Megan's daughter, but pretty much I felt like he was mine too.
Sure. I understand that.
So thank God Ron just took him in and loved him, so he's got Papa. And I, don't you love this? When my friend, I told her I was going to be a grandma, she goes, they should call you Lovey. So, oh my gosh, doesn't that melt your heart? So I'm Lovey. And if you know my older son, Jeremy, yeah. He's like sarcastic as ever. And he's like, my son's not calling you Lovey. Guess what his little Jonah calls me? Lovey.
Is that right?
Call me Lovey. So I'm loving that. But anyway, so, Ron took on the role too to help, but it was great to have Ron as a soundboard also, because I wanted to jump in a lot, right?
Right.
Good news is, no matter how messy their lives got, we both agree that Preston is a good boy. I mean, manners, hygiene, he's a good boy through all of that mess, and
well, he's a good boy. I think Megan, for all of her problems and everything with marriage and so forth, did do a pretty good job of raising this little boy. But I gotta say that for some reason, I seemed like when he was like 2 and 3 years old, I spent a lot of time with him. And, we instilled some discipline as well. I mean, even though he's a good boy, he's a boy. I remember one time we were at the dinner table, just him and I, and he grabbed a knife. And I said, Preston, put that knife down. You don't need to be carrying a knife. And he didn't do it right away. And I got kind of stern with him, even to the point of, I think I made him cry. And that night, Megan and her husband came over, and what I've noticed with a lot of young parents, it's always don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't, and they never do anything about it. And so, again, at the dinner table, Preston picked up a knife, and I heard his father. I wasn't in the room at the time. I heard his father say, "Now, Preston, put that knife down. Now, Preston, put that knife down. Now, Preston, put that knife down." I walked into the room and Preston saw me and he immediately put the knife down. So, I think he is a good boy, and a lot of the reason for that has to do with the two of us and being with us.
100%.
A lot. Yeah.
Ron, I don't want to leave this point that you brought up, excuse me, because I heard from a grandmom in the Livonia, Michigan area this morning, as a matter of fact, who was raising a 14-year-old granddaughter, and she is having a horrific problem with discipline. And in fact, it's to the point, Ron and Cyndi, where she says, if I had to do it again, I wouldn't do it. And there may be grand families listening to this across the country, saying, discipline is my issue. How did you and Cyndi instill that? And so that when you walk in the room, and I know you're not carrying around a belt or anything like this or any intimidation, but how are you? How did you instill the discipline in your grand family and make it work?
Well, first of all, I mean, sometimes we disagree. Cindy's a little softer, but she knows when to be stern. But I've always been relatively stern. I never spanked my 3 kids growing up, but I'll tell you what, when I told them to do something, they did it, and I think it was because of the tone of my voice, and I use that same tone with the grandkids, I don't. Well, with most of our grandkids, but I just, you're going to love me whether I'm, letting you buy with stuff, or you're going to love me if I'm stern and having you do the right things. And I've never given on that aspect to let kids get by with something that is not right. And so, I don't know. I mean, at one time, somebody told me one time that kids get their personality at the age of 2. And if you haven't put that personality in at the age of 2, you got a lot of work ahead of you. And I think we did that with Preston by the age of 2. I mean, that's kind of when we started to be involved in his life quite a bit.
And
So Megan got divorced, right? And then she starts dating this other guy. And every time she dates somebody, of course, they end up living together.
Right.
And so they, lived together. And then he wanted them to move to Pennsylvania. So she packs up our Preston and herself, their dog, and goes to Pennsylvania with this
No support system.
no support system. And well, Ron calls them numbnuts, right? So you can kind of figure out what kind of person that was. We begged her. I even said, give me temporary guardianships just till you get settled there. And then, we'll bring him back. No, it's going to be fine, And of course, 2 months later, she calls, I made a mistake. So then she's back in our house until she can find a place, to be. So it's not easy. It's a roller coaster ride for sure. And then she found her own place. And then, this plumber comes to fix their place there, and she falls in love with this plumber. And so, that's who she's with now. Rough guy. His family is great, though. I love his family. But now Megan, and probably a lot of you out there, are seeing that the kids in their 20s and 30s now, not all of a sudden, but I've never had to deal with this before. They're all dealing with anxiety and depression.
100%.
And yeah, like everyone you talk to, I've got depression or I have anxiety. And what they found that works for them is marijuana.
Right.
Now, I didn't grow up with marijuana. Well, I guess maybe it was there, but I never tried it because I was worried that I might get addicted to it. So I've never even tried marijuana. And so it's part of their lives to this day. The house reeks of marijuana. So maybe some of you are even dealing with that today because, everybody talks about secondhand cigarette smoke. I'm wondering, what is our children and what is happening with this marijuana now? Because it is very prevalent in people's lives today. And I mean, talk about drunk driving. Sometimes you go over to visit or they come to pick up your grandchild and their eyes are all glassy and you're thinking, oh, poo, should I let them go or not? So that's what this current day is. My biggest struggle is the marijuana. Now, Preston is a big reader. He's doing well in school, but he's a boy, right? So for some reason, these teachers don't like the word poop or balls or sex, but But that's
Put a rated R on.
Ron's like, is this a rated R show? I'm just being real with you guys, right? Because that's the things we're dealing with right now. And through all of that, he's turning out okay, right? So the other part of that is too, Megan, our daughter, has to start, she just turned 30 and she's living with the plumber, and actually he's growing on me a little bit, right?
I think he's fine.
He thinks he's fine. I just don't like the pot, but anyways. He thinks
you guys have a unique situation. Every grand family is unique, but and unlike our situation as well, there is a little bit of ping ponging going on. Like our daughter would go and stay with her latest boyfriend, and then we'd of course be on pins and needles what's happening with our granddaughter, and then she would come back, but now she's been out for over a year on the streets of Detroit. But that so obviously I would imagine one of your main concerns was, how do we keep stability for Preston? And it sounds like you guys have been able to do that because he's thriving at school and likes to read, and I'm sure he's got a bunch of friends his age that and so it's probably some pretty good teachers and some good involvement from the grandparents, right?
Yeah, I think there's a fine line that you have to learn to walk in terms of, I know Cyndi's ex-husband said she was an enabler, and I have to catch her on that as well sometimes. But there are times that, for example, Megan needed a car. I mean, if you know Dave Ramsey at all, there's 4 pillars that you got to have, and one of those pillars is transportation.
Right.
And if you're going to expect somebody to work and hold down a job and that sort of thing, they need transportation. So we had a kind of an old beater that we ended up selling to her. She got a tax refund, and we sold it to her like really cheap for like $1,000. And so that got her going. Now, was that enabling? No, I don't think so. I mean, I think you if you want, as I said, you want her to get out and get a job and work, she's got to be able to get to work. And so she had that car, and lo and behold, she didn't have it for more than a year, and she got it totaled. And it wasn't her fault, but the car was totaled. So now she's without a car again. And so we go a couple months and maybe let her have that pain. And finally, she was always borrowing our car and everything. And I had to take her to work, and we had to take Preston here. We had to take him there,
Right.
and that puts a burden on us. And we're working. We're in real estate. I mean, we don't have time for this. So finally, I said, I'm going to give her $2,500 to buy a car. And Cyndi tried to put rules on buying the car. And so she, to her credit, wasn't going to take the money if I had all these rules attached. And I said, whoa, there are no rules. This is a gift. You are going to go and get your car and get back to work. And so she did that. But, was that enabling? Again, I don't think so. I think it was that fine line that you cross of you help because you can, and you help that to get back on your feet, because I'm still a firm believer that there are 4 pillars to financial success. And one of those pillars is having transportation to get to work.
I totally agree. And, Ron, I have a PhD in enabling myself, so I can recognize a good enablement situation when I hear one. But enabling your daughter would be buying her a used BMW, and as opposed to giving her $2,500 for some safe, modest, stable transportation to and from the office. I think, anyway, you're just being a good parent and helping kids get stabilized. And so, in the few minutes we have left, I wanted to ask you guys, how has your faith helped you deal with raising kids and grandkids?
Oh, it's everything. It's everything. There's nights when I just pray all night. I mean, when taking him to Pennsylvania, I've never been to Pennsylvania. I don't even know these people. And hey, it's not just us, my whole family gets involved, right? So when she called, my brother flew there and drove her back to us. And she stayed with us. I mean, I feel like our whole family just, really helped raise this little boy and just loved this little boy, and I have to say, probably unlike a lot of you who are really in the trenches of raising these grandchildren right now, Megan and Thomas, that's the plumber's name, they're pretty sufficient, not so depending on us anymore. And it's worked out. But our faith, there's still times when I'm scared to death, right? And praying, and trying not to step in where I shouldn't. Like today she called and she said, Mom, I'm just overwhelmed. because Thomas has a little boy too, and it's summer vacation, and the 2 boys are there and they're arguing, and she has to work, and can I help? Well, I had to work today too. So I'm like, I can't help you today. You'll have to figure it out. And I gave her some suggestions. So it's come a long way, baby. That's all I can say.
Oh, that is absolutely.
Just to add to that, though, Craig.
Yes, Ron. Yes.
We were the ones that introduced Preston to church. And so we've been taking him to church for the last 4 years or so.
Oh, he's 9 years old, probably for a long time. He just got baptized Sunday.
The success story
I saw
is
that. Yeah.
He got baptized and did it on his own. His mom canceled it a couple times. She wanted him to make sure it was his decision, not Cyndi's decision. And apparently he convinced her that it was his decision. And so, yeah, he got baptized, and now his stepbrother says he wants to do it too. So
yeah, so we take the stepbrother too now. So we got the 2. We're the bus to church on Sunday mornings.
That is so exciting, and you guys are doing just an absolute terrific job with Preston, and now your soon to be step grandson, if you will, the young man who's involved, and it's just so exciting to hear a real world testimony of how God is using you in the life of your grandson, and he's just turning out absolutely great. And I want to thank you both for being our guests on this segment of It's a Grand Life. And I want to tell our audience, if you join us next time, you're going to hear about how to make real estate work for you if you're considering relocating to South Florida or wherever. We're going to ask Ron and Cyndi to give us their tips on how to make that work. Ron and Cyndi, thanks so much for being our guest, and we look forward to seeing you next time on It's a Grand Life. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us for another It's a Grand Life. Remember to never waste your pain. God can use your situation to bless others even halfway around the world. Be sure and subscribe to It's a Grand Life on our Facebook page, as well as YouTube and any of the various podcast channels that feature the Grand Life podcast. When it comes to raising a grand family, remember the words of the Apostle Paul, who said in 1 Corinthians 13, love is patient, love is kind, it always protects, always trusts, always hopes, and always perseveres. Love never fails. In leading your grand family, it's going to take faith, hope, and a whole lot of love. Please reach out to me. I can be a blessing to you and pray for you, or help you connect to free resources that can make your journey a little easier.